So we want to encourage you to look at your perspective. Which do you typically choose? Is it the long-term perspective or the short-term perspective? Are you focusing more on those Mai Tais and avoiding escaping? Or are you focused more about your sleep schedule?
It matters. If you want a long, healthy, productive, functional life, you have to take care of your body. Welcome to Evolve Ventures, the one place where leaders like you can dependably go to shift your consciousness to unlimited potential. I am your host, Bianca Thomas.
And I am your host, Emilia Smith. And we are so excited to have you back for this episode. This episode number 97, is going to be all about how to avoid overwhelm and burnout. Shout out to all of those who might feel called out right now. And we, in this episode, we're really excited to dive into some of the things that Bianca and I have experienced, what we've seen with clients, and our experiences in terms of avoiding it, and working more and more every single day to improve our ability to manage and deal with what we believe overwhelm and burnout really is and what that looks like for us. But if you haven't listened to our last episode, this will be really helpful because we want to make sure that we're bridging that gap between leadership and health and fitness and all these things that we're going to be talking about, especially when it comes to well-being and the holistic approach that we aspire to take on this. So if you haven't listened to episode number 96, feel free to jump back, take a quick listen to that, the evolved business mindset. And we hope you enjoy this journey through this episode and get you really thinking about your fitness journey. One of the things that I'm really grateful for, and we'll speak to just very briefly, is Bianca and I having a team now, a global team all over the world. When we started to dive into this theme of fitness and well-being for the month of April 2022, we got a lot of feedback from our team members. And while a lot of leaders would look at that and roll their eyes and be frustrated because you can't please everyone when it comes to the content that you roll out, we recognize how much that was a great indicator of what we are doing as leaders to make sure that we encourage a safe space so that our team provides alternative perspectives when it comes to the topics and the themes that we want to speak about and that we feel pulled and compelled to share our experiences and our stories. So shout out to the Evolve Ventures team on that. And for all of you leaders out there, you definitely might feel this in some capacity. You might feel as though no matter what you put out there, someone always has an opinion. Someone always might get upset. And that's the thing. We understand that. That's part of what leadership is. Bianca and I are really grateful to our team because what they have done is they've helped us to illuminate that the perspectives that we all share are unique. Being a team that honors and values neurodiversity, with that, there are so many different health and well-being journeys that are out there. And so while we are going to be going into the theme of fitness and well-being, what that means to us and our personal experience to that, specifically in this episode around overwhelm and burnout and how to avoid that, we want to make sure that we put the disclosure up and front and center, that we recognize that each person being so neurodiverse, having a different experience in this world, their fitness journey, their burnout and overwhelm journey, their relationship with health, well-being, and fitness is unique to their journey, truly. And so I want to put that out there real quick. Shout out to our team, but make sure that as you listen to this episode, we encourage you to do your own research, to look at your own relationships when it comes to health, fitness, and anything that we talk about, quite frankly. But we always will have research articles in the show notes for you to take a look at some of the stuff that we've learned, we've done research, and our experiences where those came from. So our hope in this episode, as it is with all other episodes, is that not that you feel like we are projecting our beliefs onto you, but rather that in us sharing our experiences, our values, our aspirations, and our beliefs as leaders, we can help you evolve in a way that makes sense to you, that makes sense to your team, that makes sense to your leadership style. And so I want to make sure that that's out there before we even start to dive into this episode. Be anything on your end that you want to make sure that we touch on prior to jumping in?
I think another component of that is you don't have to take everything that we say. Just like Emilia said, take what fits for you. So the entire month of April is going to be evolved fitness and well-being. Not everyone perceives fitness the same way. Not everyone perceives well-being the same way. Take what works for you, adapt it to fit your life, your circumstances. Like, one of the things that we intend on talking about is physical fitness and nutrition. Counting macros, for example, or counting calories or tracking or whatever. It doesn't fit for everybody, and that's okay. We do it, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about. But like Emilia said, one size does not fit all, and we get to choose what fits for us. So that's all I'm going to say.
Well said, B. So, all right. So to dive into this episode, one of the things that when we look at overwhelm and burnout, that really comes to mind is if you're someone who feels overwhelmed, there's indicators all around you that are telling you that you are overwhelmed and you are feeling burnt out. You feel like you can't take any more. You want to take a step back. You want to concave. You want to sleep on the couch. You want to completely cuddle up with your Snuggie, and you just want to put a pause on the rest of the world. And on top of that, you feel as though you're forgetting even who you are. You're forgetting where you placed your phone. You're forgetting where you place the things that matter to you, and you're forgetting how you really want to show up in this world. We see you, we honor you, and we respect where you're at. However, with this specific experience, there's a lot of pain that's affiliated with leadership and whatever your role is in leadership with this overwhelm and this burnout. It's the cycle that it seems like there's a lot of people on that cycle of just experiencing all the indicators that show you, given your unique journey, that you got to take a step back. You got to pause. You got to maybe slow it down a little bit. And while there's so many people that are quick to say that, how quick are we to actually listen to that? So I'll say very quick story here. And this is where I got the wake up call. And this was, for me, it was 2 years ago, on my 25th birthday. I, trigger warning with anyone who is listening to this with respects to, alcohol abuse. I was at this point, my 25th birthday, and I'll start by saying I was on the floor of my parents' kitchen. And I was rolling around, and we had just gone from a night out celebrating my birthday with my family, which it was a lot of fun, but had way too much wine, had a couple Mai Tais, and I was in a space. Yes. The ones that you just really don't boil on top of each other. Now, I was on the floor of the kitchen, and I think I was with my sister at that point, and I browned out, what people refer to as browned out or blacked out moment, where I really didn't have any regard of sobriety. I didn't really know where I was. And it was kind of like, holy crap, I'm here now. Was there the parent that said, you guys shouldn't be doing this? Yes, absolutely. But in this moment of holy crap, I've let it get this far. Why have I escaped into those vices? Why have, in order to celebrate my 25th year, was that necessarily the button that I continued to press to the extent where I'm now blacked out, browned out on the floor of my parents' kitchen, giggling with my sister, or at one point just there alone? Why am I crawling up to my bedroom and the next day feeling as though I'm going to die from alcohol poisoning that I wasn't clinically diagnosed for, but I self-diagnosed myself? Why did I that day choose to go down the path of sobriety and never to pick up an alcoholic beverage from there? I was overwhelmed and burnt out beyond belief. And alcohol wasn't a good solution. It never was for me. And that forgetting of where I was, it hit this moment for me of my entire life, there's been this through line of forgetting all these little instances. And if you've heard some of these episodes that we've had, one of the key indicators that I found when it comes to leadership, and a great indicator of overwhelm and burnout, is when you start forgetting the things that matter to you. I use the example of your phone, but also on that 25th birthday example, what really mattered to me at that moment was my family, was the accomplishments of that year. How did I celebrate that? It was in a misaligned way. I was choosing poorly for me, to the extent where I definitely paid the consequences, and I can joke about it now, but it was a serious issue for me. And that was my wake up call. That was my, okay, never again, Emilia. Now I know it's not easy for everyone. And everyone has their own experience with that. But to that extent, what is this YOLO mentality? Why was I seeking this pleasure and running away from maybe the traumas that I experiences? Why not? Why not have another drink? Why not slip into vice rather than just be okay with celebrating the virtue of what those 25 years were?
Mm.
Why was I snappy the day after when I chose a different life path? And why was I incoherent on the kitchen floor? Avoiding and making excuses and escaping the life that I was living, disregarding my health, my well-being, and completely disregarding how important sleep was. What was the point of that? Like there were red flags along the way that I was overwhelmed and burnt out. Were there not? I think we all have an experience, maybe not similar to this, but to the extent where we are overwhelmed, we feel burned out, we want to put a pause on everything, and we have to look back at all of our choices. We start forgetting what matters, and we start to choose in a way that truly it starts to really challenge everything that we stand for, everything that we value. And I know for me, that certainly was one point. So what Bianca and I really want to dive into is avoiding overwhelm and burnout. Maybe it's not you blackout drunk on the kitchen floor as a business leader. Maybe it isn't something as low as that. Maybe it's something lower. Maybe it's something higher, whatever it is. How did it get there? And what are the signs, the signals that you can see along the way? One of the things that she and I are going to dive into, I'm excited for Bianca to share her experiences around the sleep aspect, that sleep component. And specifically mobility. We want to take this approach. Yes, of course, this was a unique experience for me, but in the long history of terrible choices, I was really living for the moment. I was very short-term thinking in that. And in a way that truly made me feel that it was wow, I'm taking everything that I've built for granted. And how the hell, pardon my French, did I get here? So there's people that have a short-term perspective, what we call it, and there's people that have a long-term perspective. And of course, that might be very binary. For right now, we want to use that as a reference point. You might think of your health as that short-term perspective. I just live in this moment. This tastes good here and now. This feels good here and now. And you're not concerned about 10 years from now, what that impact will have, what the implications of your choices will be, especially if you're overwhelmed in your life. It is a lot easier to slip into these vices, into 10 Mai Tais, like it is a lot easier to do that than it is to actually look at the reflection in the mirror and say, wow, I need to actually look at the long-term implications. I'm hurting people around me. I'm not setting a good example. And I am burning out to the extent that I don't even know who the heck I am. So we want to encourage you to look at your perspective. Which do you typically choose? Is it the long-term perspective or the short-term perspective? Are you focusing more on those Mai Tais and avoiding and escaping? Or are you focused more about your sleep schedule?
For those listening, how do those two tie in? How does sleep align or correlate with long term from your perspective? Because I feel like a lot of people might be asking that question. Like, well, how does sleep have to do with long term, or what's long term versus short term? So can you go deeper into that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's some data that I want to pull in here. There was a global study that was done, and we'll link it in the show notes, in 2019 that says 62% of adults don't feel as though they get the sleep that they need, and they don't sleep as well as they'd like. Now, quote unquote, I'm a quote unquote adult. It's that challenging for adults. Now, think about just the children of the world now. How do those two tie together? Well, think about it. And I was talking to this about a coaching call literally yesterday. If you have a short-term perspective and that paradigm, meaning that I'm more concerned about the here and now. I'm more concerned about how to avoid what I feel in terms of overwhelm and burnout, and slip into those vices, if you will, like the Mai Tais or the distraction or the busyness, the productivity, whatever it is. If you're slipping into that, where you're choosing to go hang out with friends, you're choosing to maybe not go to the gym, you're choosing all of these in the moment feel goods, the pleasure centered choices. You're escaping what the reality is that you're statistically likely going to live to in your 80s. That's what the stats say, right? We have incredible healthcare nowadays. And while that might not apply to everyone, but you're choosing here now, not focused on how that's going to come back to you 80 years from now, or 20 years from now, or 40 years from now. Why? Because it feels so good in the moment. Why would you do anything differently? And so as it pertains specifically to sleep and mobility, what I'm referring to is if your paradigm, if you're centered around the short-term thinking, all of your behaviors will follow. For me, it was obvious that I was more concerned about short-term thinking, which allowed me to be on the floor browning out rather than entirely wrapping my life around my sleep schedule, which is what I do now, 2 years completely sober. The first thing that goes into my calendar is my sleep schedule. The second is my gym. Everything else, because those are the highest priority. Now I'm thinking from a long-term perspective, all of my other choices revolve around that. And so to connect those dots, whatever paradigm you're living from is what your behaviors will choose. And Bianca, you and I personally believe or have experienced that the biggest long-term levers that will help you avoid overwhelm and burnout is sleep. Studies show over and over and over again, if you're not getting the sleep that you need, everything else kind of starts to crumble around you. So it's so easy to say, well, I only need, 6 hours sleep. I can survive. I used to be that person. You can survive. You definitely won't thrive. And those overwhelms and burnouts, those will compile up. The compound effect, you're not excluded from that, especially as a leader, especially as you build responsibility. So hopefully does that answer?
Yeah. Or the you can sleep when you're dead mentality.
Oh yeah.
That irks me. Like Steve Harvey posted something like a couple years ago and he made another video like, well, if people don't like it, then too bad for them. But he basically made a comment saying like millionaires don't sleep 8 hours a day. And like, well, you can do what you want, but if you want to be successful, you can't sleep 8 hours a day.
Right.
And it's like, Steve Harvey, you are clearly very out of shape. You're very overweight and you clearly are unhealthy. So tell me how those two correlate. No evidence behind that, no research behind that, no backing. Just one person who has a high degree of influence making a comment that unfortunately a lot of people are going to listen to.
Yeah.
Or Arnold Schwarzenegger saying, "We'll just sleep faster." Well, you were also pounding steroids for God knows how long. Yeah, you maybe didn't need as much sleep because you had something else putting into your body, an unnatural substance that is making your body heal faster. So yeah, maybe you didn't need 8 hours of sleep, but the amount of research, the amount of data, the amount of evidence to show that lack of sleep can shorten your life. It is the one constant factor in every mental health disorder. If you look at the DSM-5, I have it behind me. I can go on every single page on every single mental health diagnosis. And one of the first 3 bullet points is poor sleep, poor sleep, poor sleep, poor sleep. It matters. If you want a long, healthy, productive, functional life, you have to take care of your body. There are so many leaders and influencers and just like these elite peak performing people who are out of shape, either under or overweight, drinking and doing all of these things. And now granted, I don't believe there's anything wrong with drinking. If you enjoy it and you do it in moderation, good on you. Like that's okay, fine. But if you're living for the weekend and that's your mentality, like, oh, it's Friday, yeah, like how so many people do, you're not going to be productive. If you are not sleeping, if you are not taking care of your body, you cannot function long term. And this is the point Emilia and I are trying to make. How do you avoid burnout and overwhelm? You focus on the long term.
Mm-hmm.
You focus on doing the things for your body that are going to allow you to do this over time. Too many of us were so focused on these short-term goals. Like, I had a client saying, well, I want to lose weight. Like, I have a goal in mind and I want to lose this amount of weight in this amount of time.
Yeah.
And I really had to sit with them and say, yeah, but what about the long term?
Mm-hmm.
Well, how is your body going to look after that? How are you going to sustain that afterwards? Why don't we take a longer term approach so you can learn the systems to have this be a part of your life, not just a short-term fix? Because unfortunately, that's what so many people do. They go on crash diets, or they do these, I'm going to do a juice cleanse, and they do these things. And it's like, that's great, but that's a short-term solution for a long-term problem. What are you going to do after that?
Mm-hmm.
And so something that Emilia and we really highlight this and we emphasize this as on our team is taking care of your body. Because when your body starts to fail, what are you going to do after that? There's only so much you can do at that point when, your internal organs start failing, because and your brain starts deteriorating and you're having heart problems because you did not take care of your body. So mobility and sleep. Now, every episode we do this month and every IG live, it's going to be around a different theme. And it's going to be around what we have coined as the 7 pillars of fitness. So today we're talking about sleep and mobility. Well, how do those relate to long-term goals? Well, sleep, we just talked about. And Emilia has done so much research in her life to gather information on this and to help her. And she'll go into that after. But I'm going to talk really quick about mobility. If you are not doing mobility, I'll speak for myself. When I was 18, I started doing powerlifting when I was 17, I think about 10 years ago. And I was like stupid strong for no reason when I first started. Like I was very bottom heavy and I was just very strong. So powerlifting came a little easy to me when I first started. Unfortunately, I was not thinking long term. I was not being intelligent. So when I'm 18, I go in the gym and I'm not wearing a belt doing deadlifts. And a friend of mine comes up to me and goes, "Oh, you got more than that. You can do more than that." And in my head, I knew I could, but I did not do it intelligently. I didn't say to this person, "Yeah, I probably could, but I'm choosing not to because I care about my health." My ego flared up and I'm like, "Okay, let's do it." So there's 270 pounds on the barbell. I go to do a deadlift and I destroyed my back. I did what's called a stripper deadlift, which is you literally shoot your butt up. So your legs are completely straight and then you curl your back. Like, I don't know how to explain it. It's just my legs were completely straight and my back did like this little curve to try to get the bar up. And I herniated a disc. And one of the biggest regrets I have in my life, I don't regret much. And I'm doing a lot of work on myself to not have regrets in my life and just making a different meaning out of everything. But this is something I regret because 10 years later, I am still having spine issues. And I probably am going to have to get spinal surgery now because I hurt my back. And what did I do? I was not doing mobility after that. I wasn't being smart. I kept trying to lift super heavy and I kept making it worse and I kept making it worse and I kept making it worse. And now I'm suffering for it 10 years later. And I think this is the perfect example. Short-term thinking is now causing a long-term problem to where I might have to get surgery. And that's an extreme example, but how many of us are thinking that way? Well, I'm just going to make a decision now and I'm not going to think about what it's going to do to me later. So mobility, let's just go back to that one. How does your body feel when you wake up in the morning? Is it achy and you struggle getting out of bed and everything hurts and it takes a hot minute to get out of bed? Or do you wake up feeling like your body is mobile, it's flexible, you can move it? How do you think that's going to impact you throughout the day? If you're a leader and your back is hurting you, how do you think you might react to your team if you're in pain? I've had that happen. I've had people in my life who did not do anything and I snapped because I was in pain. And so I had a short temper. So it matters. As a leader, if you're not taking care of your body, the long-term consequences of that are more damaging than you believe.
It's so true. And one of the things that like we are just focusing on these two and we're not laying claim to like that this is the end all be all for everyone, but this is what we've experienced. And we hope that us sharing these can help you choose better so that you can evolve your idea of overwhelm, burnout, fitness, well-being 1% more than you have. That's all really we're here to do. Now, if you can have a revelation, awesome. That's also what we're here for. But B, you had said something a little bit earlier, and then we're going to start to wrap this episode because I gotta go. But about productivity and lost productivity when you're focused just on the short term and just on the behaviors that are in alignment with the short term thinking, and how that can really continue to increase overwhelm and burnout. One of the stats, and I'll again link this research study in the show notes here. One of the stats with respects to the economic impact, and this was just a study done within the US alone. So I apologize for our global listeners, but you can imagine if this is happening in the US, what that impact might be within your country. So the average cost that was calculated from a statistical standpoint when it comes to the insufficient sleep global issue, just in the US alone, the economic cost range from $299 billion to $433 billion per year.
Wow.
Now, yeah. And why sleep matters, there's so much underneath that. And if you're a business leader, a business owner, you know, what does that look like? We've talked about productivity in terms of like, you know, engaged workers, engaged team members, people who are actually like, that's even from like, you know, health costs and just so many other things that come as a result of that. And so it's fascinating because when you really start to dig into some of this material, you realize a lot of the overwhelm and burnout you're experiencing comes back down to some of these things that are very basic, and this shifting culture to less and less sleep, more hustle, more distraction, right? The things that are bidding for your time more, it makes it a lot harder to leverage that long-term perspective for your benefit and for other generational benefits. And, you know, it's just fascinating to see what kind of impact that has, not only for you. Like, for example, one small little stat that's actually in this, I believe it's the same research study that was talking about, mental health. And you had mentioned that, B. People with medium to high risk of mental health problems sleep on average 17.2 minutes less per day than those with lower risk of mental health issues. So it's just, you can go into the personal, the socio-demographic, different lifestyle and health factors. But when it comes to mental health, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to productivity versus sleep, long-term, all these things, burnout, how to avoid overwhelm and burnout is to tune into your unique health journey and not avoid that, and not necessarily adopt the belief that maybe was pushed on you that because our family is predisposed to X, Y, and Z, you are going to have that experience. Your experience is unique. It is yours. It's yours to own. And it's also yours to be able to influence. I could have chosen to continue the trajectory I was on, to circle this all the way back and to wrap this up. I could have chosen to continue that path, to continue drinking alcohol, to continue, wrapping my life around just the short-term things and just the pleasure and just the all that jazz, right? Bianca, you could have continued to choose to power lift. But we had that sobering moment, each of us in our own regard, because we experienced the pain. And with that pain, we saw the path that was helping us say, here, this is a way to evolve into the long-term approach, into the long-term way of being, whether that was mobility for both of us or sleep. Now I have a goal of mine that's elite brain performance, which is something we'll be rolling out to clients. Is how do you know that your brain is performing at an elite level? An elite, not to make anyone feel less than, but rather your version of elite, your potential maximized, realized. That's a goal, and you can influence whether you wrap your life around good choices for you or not. You can allow the boundaries and the beliefs of others to come into your health journey or not, to bring it all the way to the top. For what Bianca had said, you choose this journey, you choose your path. And though you might be pre-exposed, or you might have pre-existing conditions, we want to encourage and inject that belief that you have the ability to work with your physical, your mental, your emotional, your spiritual health and well-being. And the overwhelm and burnout is unique to you, but you are certainly not alone. And so if anything, we hope that this episode helped you to realize how it is a global issue, this overwhelm and burnout, and it's increasing because of what we'll talk about in the future of these boundaries that are kind of getting blurred. So anyways, that's what I have to say, and I'm over and out. So we know we kind of got in a couple of different directions in this episode, and it might not be fully clear of how it's unique to you in terms of avoiding overwhelm and burnout. Bianca and I really brought forward the sleep and the mobility from our unique perspective, but it could look very different from you. And we hope we really built that message through this episode, and to have you reflect in on, do you have a long-term perspective, or are you living in a short-term perspective? And understanding which one you currently are choosing your behaviors, your life in, will help you realize, okay, are you actually choosing burnout and overwhelm? Has that been embedded into your life choices, into your habits, into even your social structure, right? The job that you have, the friends that you have, the community that you look to for support, are they adding to your overwhelm, or are they really helping to avoid this burnout? And so we focused on that, the long-term, the short-term perspective. Are you scheduling sleep? Are you looking at that as something to wrap your entire life around? Because we know, everyone has a different health journey, but the brain is certainly something that is what we all have. And so we focus on those, and mobility is a great physical representation of the body, getting in the body. But B, I know you have some episode suggestions that will help the listeners that are tuning in understand even more of how to avoid this overwhelm and burnout. So as we go into suggestions, I want each listener to look at how these episodes, jumping off from this episode, can really have you encouraged to reflect on, are these things adding to your overwhelm and burnout, or are they helping to take away? So what would you say were your episode suggestions, and why specifically pertaining to this episode?
So number 16, why longevity, health, wellness, and fitness? I think that's pretty straightforward as to why, why I picked that one. Number 81, bridging the gap between medicine, brain, and mental health. So in that episode, we had Dr. Nissen, who is a medical doctor, who actually specializes in like sleep study, cognitive behavioral therapy, and a lot of these other components that you wouldn't think tie together, but do really well. And he talks about sleep in that episode. It's a really great episode. And then 84, fastest way to recognize your worth. I put that one in there because I think when it comes to health, wellness, and fitness, so many of us are just so afraid, and we're so nervous to try because the idea of fitness can be so daunting. And in that episode, we really talk about how to build your worth and how to recognize your worth. And it's really by just trying and putting yourself out there. So that's why I chose those 3 episodes. What were yours?
Thanks, B, for saying that, because I think that one of the things after doing so much time invested in coaching and helping people all over the world, if they don't believe they're worthy for the long term, why would they ever choose to develop and to design a life that is focused on that, that goes to the gym every single day, that, circulates around sleep, that circulates around having positive habits that really do help to avoid overwhelm and burnout? If they didn't believe that they're worthy enough for that, a lot of the behaviors will follow and show that. For me, for example, I could even go back to that moment. I have tons of self-belief, but if I fully believed I was worthy enough for that long term, I would choose differently, point blank. I wouldn't have the overwhelm and burnout that I had at that moment, where my 25th birthday celebration would have been in that degree of choices. I would have been more focused on that long term because I believed that that was more important for me, right? And that I was worthy enough for that long term. So my choices of, the third Mai Tai or whatever might have looked a little bit different in terms of the choices. I wouldn't have lived from that short-term paradigm, and I would have not prioritized fun and pleasure over long-term and consciousness. Really appreciate that episode suggestion. So listen to those. The 3 that I really suggest jumping off this one for, if you want to continue your own health journey from an alternative perspective, was episode 87, doer. Are you a doer or a pretender? That is something that I've woken up to in terms of, if I want to avoid overwhelm and burnout, then I need to start doing the things that help me do that. I need to start sleeping more. I need to start understanding what is causing that overwhelm and burnout, instead of just numbing or coping or developing a strategy for me that distracts me from actually realizing the truth of my experience, pretending that I'm good, pretending I'm okay. I will crumble down and I'll be back in this cycle that I felt before. Just like a lot of the leaders that I coach with. Why are we doing these things? Why are we getting stuck in these patterns? Well, it's because you're pretending to understand it. You're pretending to understand your own health journey. You're pretending to understand your overwhelm and burnout. You've never actually done the work to take a look at, what does your health journey mean? And what are the hours of REM sleep that you're getting? How much mobility are you encouraging into your routine? Are you tracking any sort of things that matter? Are you measuring what matters to you? Are you doing, aka behaving in the realm that serves you, or are you not? And so that's why I chose that episode. The second one is episode number 50, how to find your tribe. What I found time and time again, not only myself, but Bianca, I know you've seen this, and a lot of research supports this, that who you surround yourself with will help you either avoid this burnout or contribute to it. Plain and simple. The people that you surround yourself with will support those habits or help you develop ones that do not serve you. I know that full well, right?
That's why I was piss drunk on my 26th birthday. Yeah. And I am a year sober. I haven't touched alcohol in exactly a year and a couple days, because my birthday, as of right now when we're recording this, was a couple days ago. So
yeah, good for you.
Who you're around matters significantly.
Yeah. And it's challenging to talk about this, and, I might get a little feedback that's not necessarily so positive, focusing on the impact of this episode, but rather how it connected to this person's experience. But I had family around me saying, like, that's not a good idea, straight out. Like, you shouldn't go do that. You guys just had some wine. Now you want to go out and go drink those Mai Tais, which are historically known to put you on the floor. Don't do that. Like, I literally had my dad, like, do not do that. And the people that, my family loved them, but the people like my brother and my sister was like, nah, screw that. Right. They're in that short-term thinking at that moment too. Otherwise things would have changed. Tucker says hello. So that being said, those who you surround yourself with, pardon Tucker in the background, those who you surround yourself with will impact your choices. And whether you live from a place that is short-term thinking or long-term thinking, whether you're focused on overwhelm and burnout and how to like just survive in that, or have you challenge yourself to change and choose a different perspective, choose a different paradigm, and choose different behavior. So that was the second one. The last one, and hopefully Tucker will not take this mic from me, is episode number 48. For those of you who don't know, Tucker's my 4-pound Chihuahua dog. Look at my Instagram for pictures. He's cute. Anyways, episode number 48, what builds self-belief? Bianca mentioned self-worth. Self-worth and self-belief are the two biggest crux to what we find time and time again with coaching. Doesn't matter who you are, what level, what grade you are in a company, like self-belief and self-worth will be the Achilles heels of whether you choose a short-term or a long-term perspective. That's what we found. It may not resonate with you as that's the reason or that's the why you are having and choosing this burnout. And you might completely villainize me and say that I've never chosen burnout. Burnout's chosen me, right? And that's okay. But here's the thing. You got to build that self-belief. And that's why this episode, I believe, would be a great suggestion for you to hop off onto, because if you're feeling that overwhelm and burnout, do something different, because you're going to find yourself back here one day and you're going to be like, man, I wish I listened to that episode. I wish I really took what they said and I wish I chose differently, because here I am again on the kitchen floor, browning out with my friends and thinking that this feels good, or going on the weekend and doing whatever. But at the end of the day, I know deep down my health is suffering. I'm starting to look into the mirror and I'm not happy. I'm starting to look at myself internally from a spiritual level and I'm not fulfilled. I'm not aligned. And the energy that I'm emanating to my team is not getting the results that I want. We aren't feeling connected. We aren't feeling psychologically safe. Why? I wonder. Is it because I'm not doing things and I'm not taking the risk to build that self-belief in myself? Am I doing things proactively to take the leadership stance and try to lead by example in terms of overwhelm and burnout? Am I encouraging the people around me to build belief within themselves so that they feel entitled and enabled and empowered to fill their cup, to bring their best to the table, so that they're not contributing to that huge perspective, just even from an economic cost? I know that stat that I mentioned earlier. Am I doing that? Am I leading from the front? Am I supporting from the back? Are we looking at all different aspects of that? And so that episode, I really truly believe that when you do things that you make promises to yourself on and it feels good, that emanates from within. And like we said at the very beginning, to tie this all together into takeaways, when you're doing things that matter to you, your health journey is very different from the person standing next to you, from the person you're thinking of. And so you are entitled to explore that. We encourage you to understand what overwhelms you, what burns you out, and be curious to your unique journey. When you aren't curious to your unique journey, you will never understand how to avoid these burnouts, these overwhelms, these feelings of complete anxiety, mental health challenges. Like, that is a fact. And so we just want to encourage each one of you to look at that from a new perspective. And my takeaway for this episode is to really analyze your unique journey. Specifically on this episode, we hope that we made you think a little bit about your short-term versus long-term. Are your behaviors following that? What is the why underneath that? And how can you evolve your unique fitness and health and well-being journey from that? B, what is your episode takeaway?
I just had a massive brain fart. Wow.
I have those all the time, girl. Must be the beans.
Yeah. Wow, I just got that. Okay. My takeaway for this episode would be your health matters so much. And too few of us really connect the dots between our overall success in life with our health and with the long-term focus of health. And if you want to have the most successful, happy, fulfilling life that you could ever imagine, your health has to be a huge component and priority of that.
Wow. Beautifully said.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you for being a part of this community. We have a lot of stuff that's going to be rolling out within the next month, a lot of new things that we are starting. So be on the lookout for, announcements, challenges, and a lot more better, valuable content. At Evolve Ventures, we really are so passionate about providing the greatest content and the greatest value that we possibly can to really help every single one of you evolve and grow. So be on the lookout for all of these new exciting things. And thank you so much for being a part of this community. And we'll talk to y'all soon.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.